Can I ask the public gallery not to sing? Hartsdown Park is down the road. If you want to support your local football team, I'd advise you to go there when they're playing, but not in the chamber. Thank you. If we carry on like that, I'll have the public gallery emptied and you can shout outside. Thank you. Good evening, members and officers of the Council and members of the press and public. You're welcome. I welcome you to this meeting of the Council. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Does anyone intend to film the meeting this evening? Thank you very much. In that case, any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. Any filming or recording will not be permitted for any item of business where exempt or confidential information is considered, following the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Thank you. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from councillors Lynn Fairbrass, Falcon, Larkins, Matterface, Pugh, Stumer Schmersing, Hillman, Day, Brim and Braywood, and Banbridge. What she was here. Are there any other apologies?
Councillor Roy Potts, please, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. Agenda item 2, minutes of previous meeting held on the 6th of September 2018. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 6th of September 2018 be approved and signed as a correct record. Would the Vice Chairman please second? Who's that? Are you a councillor? No. Well, you can see the minutes on the TDC website once you learn to manoeuvre your way through the system, but the minutes will be there. Can I have that seconded, Vice Chairman?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item 3, announcements. It is with regret that I have to announce that the former councillor Trevor Eames has recently passed away. Mr Eames was a Liberal Democrat councillor and Mayor of Broadstairs and St Peters. I'm sure Council will join me in expressing sympathy to Mr Eames's family. Could all members please stand for a minute's silence as a mark of respect for the late Mr Eames. Thank you. Councillor Hayton, I was just about to say, does any member wish to say a few words? Councillor Hayton.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening. Trevor Eames was a very good councillor for Broadstairs and St Peters Town Council. Also in this chamber, he was a very good district councillor. We both shared the business of the Bradstow ward in Broadstairs, obviously. We didn't always see eye to eye, but mostly we did. And quite frankly, it's sad to hear that poor old Trevor's gone, and I'll miss him well. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hayton. Councillor, yes, Johnson.
That's me. Thank you. I'd like to obviously offer our sympathy to Trevor's family. There aren't many councillors here now who actually will remember him, but obviously Bob, you too will recall him. But for me, it was the fun we had at Folk Week and other events, because he wasn't just a district councillor or the mayor of Broadstairs. He was very involved, as were his family, in all the life of Thanet, and in particular, as I say, the Folk Week. I remember him with great affection. And I think that we should always mark the passing of our councillors, no matter how long ago it is, because sometimes people are forgotten, and I'd like to be noted that we, on the Labour side, send our deepest sympathy to his family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I wasn't a councillor when he sat in this chamber, but I did get involved with Trevor in Broadstairs, and in addition to his work with the Folk Week, he was very active in the Dickens Festival, and one of his things that he organised was the cricket, the Dickensian cricket on Victoria Gardens, back in the days when we had proper teams. And as I remember, in order to get into the cricket team, you needed to go for a trial. They were the Broadstairs Bradstonians, who regularly played the teachers and lecturers from then Thanet College. Yes, he was very, very active, and yes, it's a sad passing. No other members wish to speak. I'll then move on to agenda item 4, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in association with this evening's agenda? No declarations of interest. Agenda item 5 is petitions. No petitions have been received in accordance with Council Procedure number 12. Agenda item 6, questions from the press and public. One question has been received from a member of the public in accordance with Council Procedure Rule number 13. Please note that only the questioner and respondent are permitted to speak on the question, and that if the questioner is not present at this meeting, their question cannot be put but will be replied to in writing. Could the questioner please only state the name of the Cabinet member to whom their question is to be put, and read out the exact wording of the question that they submitted to Council. So agenda item 6A is question number 1, and the only question that we have this evening, and that's with regards to street cleaning around St John's Road and Addington Street. I'm pleased to welcome Ms White to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table? Thank you very much. And your question is?
My question is for Councillor Savage. What steps are being taken to clean the streets around Hawley Square? The only time the square and Addington Street are free of litter is when I carry out a litter pick myself. The area outside St John's Road is of particular concern, with dumped mattresses and other rubbish.
Thank you, Ms White. Well put. I call upon the Councillor Savage to respond. Councillor Savage.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening, Ms White. Thank you for your question, and I have an answer for you. First and foremost, a manual sweeper does clean Hawley Square, and daily. The mechanical sweeper also attends this area after 9 AM, 5 days out of 7 a week. It does so at this time at the request of residents due to the noise it can make. This presents a problem as the square is not fully accessible to clean after 9 a.m. due to parked cars. If residents are prepared for us to use mechanical sweepers between the hours of 6 and 8, we stand a better chance of getting the streets more thoroughly cleaned. Perhaps you could let us know on that position. We are looking at trialling some pedestrian sweeping machines which are able to clean the pavements and smaller spaces. Funds have been made available by the Council to purchase this type of equipment in the 2019-2020 years. The bulky waste collection vehicle collects any dumped items of rubbish once investigated, and a collection is requested by enforcement. However, we do have to bear in mind that some items may be dumped on private land and a more lengthy enforcement process applies, which may unfortunately be the case in some respects this time. Specifically in the case of St John's Road concerning bulky waste, I can report as follows. A dumped washing machine has been collected by the Council. 4 dumped black refuse sacks have been collected by Thanet Council. A pile of dumped timber has been collected by Thanet Council. A dumped mattress has been collected by the Council. A dumped chair has been collected by the Council. Now, the above action should not have been necessary as there is a corporation tip at Half Mile Ride for the disposal of bulky waste, and if a resident does not have transport, the Council will dispose of such items with a book collection service at a small charge. With respect to litter in the area of Hawley Square, Addington Street and St John's Road generally, it is there in the first place because unfortunately there are some people who do not dispose of the litter responsibly. The Council, and I'm sure everyone else, greatly appreciates the actions of proactive residents like yourself, who take care of their local environment, and we hope that seeing this helps to encourage others to take more care and not to drop litter and dump waste, spoiling our otherwise beautiful community. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Savage. Thank you, Ms White. Agenda item 7, questions from members of the Council. No questions have been received from members in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 14. Move on to agenda item 8, motions of notice. No motions on notice have been received in accordance with the Council Procedure Rule 3. And agenda item 9, Leader's Report. I call upon the Leader. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to announce that Thanet District Council has been allocated an additional £483,000 in provisional funding from central government under its Rough Sleeping initiative. The provisional allocation is for 2019-20 and follows an earlier successful bid for funding which saw the district receive £376,000 for a range of initiatives aimed at rough sleeping reduction for 2018-19. The final allocation will be dependent on progress made in the delivery of the 2018 programme and services. The funding received to date is being used to deliver support for both new and entrenched rough sleepers, with a particular focus on delivering tangible support, which is also tailored to each individual. This means tackling the many reasons people struggle to find and then stay in accommodation. Funding received has made possible the launch of the Thanet RISE service, RISE standing for Rough Sleeper Intervention, Support and Empowerment, which aims to work with those most in need and address any underlying barriers to finding and maintaining accommodation. The RISE team undertake early morning and late night outreach to verify people who have been reported as rough sleeping and work with them to develop a personalised support plan to deal with some of the reasons they may have trouble staying in accommodation. The issue of rough sleeping is a complex one, and it's vital that these vulnerable residents are given the widest possible range of support. The work we are doing to assist the people who are sleeping rough in Thanet has already begun and is clearly making a really big difference. The fact that we potentially have the funds to continue that work for another year is fantastic news. Additionally, following a recent visit, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government wrote to Thanet Council to say how impressed they were with the progress the Council had made this year in tackling homelessness locally. They were particularly impressed with the fact that the Council now has no families with children placed in temporary hotel accommodation. Last month, we hosted a visit from 5 members of the House of Lords Select Committee on regenerating seaside towns and communities. The cross-party peers are conducting an inquiry into the complex challenges faced by seaside towns and communities and requested a visit to Margate as part of their evidence gathering. Members of the committee met with senior councillors and officers from the council, as well as key partners from the public sector and representatives from the local business community. Their objective was to understand some of the challenges the area faces, including issues around housing, as well as examining the effect of regeneration and the role of the visitor economy in generating change. The visit provided an opportunity for the council to demonstrate the positive impact of a range of ongoing projects, including the Live Margate Housing Intervention Programme, the Multi-Agency Task Force and the Dalby Square Regeneration Scheme. This was achieved via a tour of key sites in Cliftonville. In addition, visits to the Turner Contemporary and Dreamland were held to showcase examples of successful regeneration in the town. Being able to demonstrate the impact of the work we're already undertaking and the ongoing challenges we continue to face in the area itself was a unique and welcome opportunity. Then it is fortunate that in recent years visitor growth has bucked the national trend, so we have a positive story to tell. That said, we face significant pockets of deprivation and the related challenges that brings, something many seaside towns and resorts experience. We are working hard to tackle this, but there is always more that can be done, and I'm hopeful that by working together across government and the public, private and voluntary sectors, we can strengthen our approach and continue to thrive as a coastal destination. Lord Bassam of Brighton, who chairs the Select Committee, has said that the valuable insights they gained from their visit will play an important part in their inquiry. New rules came into play from Monday the 1st of October 2018, which will require more landlords to secure a licence for houses in multiple occupation that they rent out. An HMO is a property that contains more than one household. Mandatory licensing of HMOs came into force in 2006 and originally applied to properties of 3 or more stories with 5 or more people living in them. Most licensable properties contain some shared kitchens, bathrooms and toilets. The law is now changing, and most HMOs rented by 5 or more people will now need a licence, irrespective of how many stories there are in the building. HMOs with up to 4 occupants will not be affected, and nor will some HMOs which are self-contained flats within larger purpose-built blocks. But further requirements will also come in force, which will set minimum sizes for bedrooms in licensable HMOs. The changes are being introduced by government to protect more HMO tenants. This will help ensure that landlords meet their health and safety obligations and do not allow overcrowding to blight people's lives. Where an effective HMO does not have a licence, the landlord cannot use a Section 1 notice to seek possession of the property and evict tenants. Landlords also will be required to adhere to council refuse schemes. The measure is intended to reduce antisocial behaviour associated with waste problems in HMOs, and this will help reduce their impact and will benefit neighbours and surrounding communities. If they haven't already done so, HMO landlords are urged to act now and apply for a licence. Affected landlords who fail to apply for licences by Monday the 1st of October will be at risk of criminal prosecution and unlimited court fines. Additionally, the Council will have the power to apply for a rent repayment order and will soon also have the option of issuing a civil penalty of up to £30,000. Following the question asked at the last Council meeting about the Newgate shelter, Councillor Gregory has met with Councillor Dawson and the newly formed Friends of Cliftonville Coastline to discuss the procedure for a community asset transfer. This will be coming to a future Cabinet meeting for permission to advertise for interested community groups to come forward. This week, he also signed legal papers for KCC to surrender the lease on their centre at the Tivoli Road building, which is adjacent to Dewson's. This has been closed for some time, but will now be marketed on a short-term letting basis, whilst various options are appraised for the site to be used for a non-treasury investment purpose, probably small industrial units, which will provide a substantial and sustainable income for the Council in the future. In further asset management news, this year to date, over 80 assets have now been transferred to community groups, town and parish councils, or sold on the open market. This reduces the cost liability to TDC or brings in substantial cash receipts for reinvestment in council services or commercial opportunities. A good example of this is the sale of units at Hartsdown, which sold for £450,000. Last month also saw a record-breaking number of volunteers taking part in Great British Beach Cleans. There were 2 events.
Sorry, can we have...
Shameful.
That may well be the case, but we're going to listen to the leader. Thank you. I'll ask you to leave the chamber if you carry on. Leader, can you carry on, please?
Thank you, Chair. Last month also saw a record-breaking number of volunteers taking part in Great British Beach Cleans. There were 2 events run by Thanet Coast Project on the 15th of September. They were hugely successful, being attended by the largest ever number of volunteers. In total, there were 163 volunteers on our 2 beach cleans. At Pegwall Bay, over 100 volunteers collected 120 kilograms of beach litter, and at Plum Pudding near Minnis Bay, around 60 volunteers collected a further 30 kilograms. Additionally, 2 GBBC surveys were completed and submitted to the Marine Conservation Society for their national database, and to see how our beaches are faring over time. These 2 beaches have been monitored over the last 15 years, and they seem cleaner than never before, but plastics remain the most common items found in all this time. The efforts of these volunteers mean that these beaches will be a lot cleaner for our maritime, marine and bird life, as well as our residents and visitors. And while speaking about visitors, I'm pleased to report that the Visitor Information Centre at Droit House has experienced its busiest summer since opening in its current location. Figures for this July and August show a 32% increase rise in footfall compared to those in 2011 when it opened. In total, there were over 28,000 contacts for July and August 2018. This includes actual visitors to the VIC, as well as phone calls and emails received. Figures are also up on the same time period last year, with footfall rising by 19% and contacts rising by 10%. A huge thank you is due to the dedicated staff who helped to provide such a fantastic service for our visitors. And finally, I am pleased to announce that our seasonal public toilets are remaining open till the end of October. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. I call upon Councillor Crowe-Brown to comment on or ask questions in relation to the Leader's report. Councillor Crowe-Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Chair, for a comprehensive report. I'm surprised the Leader hasn't mentioned the draft local plan, especially the distribution of houses from the largest brownfield site in Thanet, moving the allocation to the residents of Birchington, Westgate, Hartsdale, Minster and Westwood. I'm sure he's enjoying dealing with the numerous public comments as to why these areas have been allocated hundreds of homes.
Councillor Crowe-Brown, can we stick to the points raised by the Leader, please? Okay. I think we've dealt with the local plan, and obviously the consultation is taking place, and we will assemble the comments, and no doubt those sort of comments will be in that
Thank you, Chair.
summary once we put it together. Thank you.
Rough sleeping. It's very good news indeed that to hear the council has been allocated an additional government funding of £483,000 dealing with rough sleeping in Thanet. I've always considered our housing department to be one of the top performing departments in the council. I've had plenty of great dealings with them, and I wish them best to help with this additional money in this dealing with this complex situation. I'm also pleased to hear about the new rules regarding that come into play from Monday the 1st of October, which require more landlords to secure a licence for houses of multiple occupancy. Our selective licensing schemes in Margate and Cliftonville are a key weapon in the battle to improve standards in the private rented sector, weed out landlords putting tenants at risk, and deal with crime and antisocial behaviour. And on a final note, in terms of tourism, we are delighted Thanet continues on an upward trend. Estimated 4 million visitors every year, discovering and exploring our fantastic beaches, our blue flag areas, our villages and heritage, and thriving and growing cultural scene. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe-Brown. Leader wish to respond? I don't think there's much to respond to, so I'll move on, and I call upon Councillor Reverend Piper to comment on, ask questions in relationship to the Leader's report. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having got myself into a little bit of trouble last time by appearing to ask a question about which the Leader couldn't reply and answer, this evening I will start with a couple of comments, and then I have a couple of questions, please. although it is not necessarily asking you to reply this evening, but some reply, if you're able, will be very helpful. The news of further funding for tackling homelessness and other rough sleeping issues is indeed very welcome. This does, however, need to be more than just a sticking plaster. I think we're all aware that the demand is increasing at an extraordinary rate. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate those multi-agency staff and those councillors, particularly Jenny Matterface and Lynn Fairbrass, to name just two, who have been very busy working together for more than a couple of good years now with the Winter Shelter Programme and other measures to try and bring some help to those who are most vulnerable. The Council indeed gets the plaudits from the MHCLG, which is good, but it is worth remembering the unspoken heroes who take on night shift support and other services to help. It's good to hear that the House of Lords Select Committee enjoyed their visit and were impressed by what they saw. I'm going to try this one again. It may be nice to invite them to return to see what they missed this time, namely Ramsgate, which is great, which Leader has great need of their gathered wisdom, particularly the wisdom they have so recently gathered from Thanet. The changes to HMO regulations are much needed and one hopes will provide genuine protection for vulnerable tenants, and perhaps in the future changes for smaller HMOs will also be forthcoming. Leader, when someone is particularly successful in sporting achievement or has received numerous awards for military service, it is usual to list those achievements in order of prestige or seniority, so one can get a good idea of what's actually been going on. From your report, Leader, it says, in further asset management news, to date over 80 assets have now been transferred to community groups, town and parish councils, or sold on the open market. This reduces the cost liability to TDC or brings in substantial capital receipts for reinvestment in council services or commercial opportunities. A good example of this being the sale of units at Hartsdown, which sold for £450,000. They appear to be randomly listed, and I would hazard a guess, Leader, that sale on the open market may not be the least significant method of asset disposal. If a good example is Hartsdown, please permit me to ask for sometime in the future, are there any bad examples we should take note of? More seriously, do we, not to mention the public, ever really see where the money goes in terms of reinvestment in council services or commercial opportunities? Leader, can I plead for a change of heart on the Western Undercliff site, which includes the old motor house? There has been a dedicated team of local people, aided by celebrities and other investors, who have a real interest in bringing forward Project Motorhouse. If members are not too aware of the plans, I recommend a quick read. The site is in an admittedly
Councillor
dangerous
Piper,
condition.
are we going to stick to the agenda that, or the report that the Leader? I think we all sympathise with the situation you're outlining, and perhaps that's a subject for a future council meeting. But I don't think this evening we need to be taught what has happened in the past. I think we're all aware of the situation. It's a very sad situation, and for someone. Can I speak to the councillor, please? Sorry, can I speak to the councillor? I was going to say, Councillor Piper, as someone who saw the Rolling Stones there in the past, I find it very sad. So I sympathise with you, but have you finished your response?
Chairman, thank you. There are just a couple of really, I believe, important points for the public. It is under the asset disposal heading that the Leader has introduced in his report. The site is dangerous, and if a happy developer or prospector wins the open auction for the site, does the council have any measures in hand to place a guarantee the site will be made safe immediately? Actually, Leader, I was going to ask, why can't we enter into some kind of relationship with investors to Project Motorhouse so that we can keep that wonderful asset? If we do, I'm sure it will enhance the role of, how you put it in your report, in quotes, the visitor economy generating change. Not just for Ramsgate, but for the whole of Thanet. I am disappointed, Leader, that the Visitor Information Centre at Ramsgate, which is in Custom House, just in case anybody is unaware of where it is. Didn't warrant a mention in the congratulations for those organisations bringing visitors and helping visitors once they get here. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to continue.
That's quite all right. And you'll note that the VIK kiosk in Broadstairs wasn't mentioned either. Leader, would you like to respond to a couple of questions I think there were in there?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think the first thing, you talked about the rough sleeper situation. It is a growing problem, and I think that this council is responding with its partners very positively to the situation. And I think the seriousness of the problem and the increasing nature of it is reflected in the fact that government are looking to give more money towards this problem, and hopefully we will use it effectively. And you mentioned the winter shelter, and that has received a number of awards, and you're right, for everybody that works and volunteers there, again, deserves our plaudits. You asked whether the Lords are going to come back and visit Ramsgate, having been to Margate. It was out of our control. They specifically asked to come to Margate, and that was the way the visit was structured. But I can assure you that in the presentation that we gave to the Lords before we went on the tour, Ramsgate was indeed mentioned, as indeed were other places in Thanet. So they are aware that we have issues in other parts of the island, not just in Margate and Cliftonville. The listing of asset disposals, no, there was no hierarchy there, and that was the list as it was given to me. So there we are. As far as Western Undercliff is concerned, yes, I'm aware of the community concern about this. Again, I'm led to believe that the situation here is that it was registered as a community asset, and as soon as that happens, the council is obliged to follow a legal process, which it has followed. And I can tell you no more than that. I think that's about it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Now, in the absence of Councillor Matterface, I call upon Councillor Constantine to comment on or ask questions in relationship to the Leader's report. Councillor Constantine, and if we can keep the questions
Thank you, Chair.
to the Leader's report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The clock had started. Fantastic that we're doing more for rough sleepers. Action is very much needed. In Thanet, we have more than double the national average of rough sleepers. In fact, rough sleeping has grown by 169% since 2010. I don't know what changed in 2010. And that rate continues to rise. Tackling the causes of rough sleeping is a little like trying to tackle the causes of the current mental health crisis and the crisis in the provision of social care, both of which contribute hugely to rough sleeping. This government have done so much to create rough sleeping, poor mental health and a struggling NHS. We are now trying to fix a broken society with an ever-decreasing budget, and I note that council funding will be cut by a further £1.3 billion next year. On the topic of the rough sleeping and the RISE project, could the Leader tell me exactly who RISE are employing? I'm very pleased to hear that the visit by the MHC at LG was so successful. I wonder if it was pointed out to them that the prospect of 400 social homes which were available to us from Stonehill Park and much needed are actually now not available to us. And did you talk to them about the cuts to our families' budgets by the introduction of universal credit? The poorest families in our community stand to lose £200 per month. We know we've got 4 million children in poverty, and that is rising. And we know that we've got some of the poorest wards in Thanet. Housing benefit has been frozen.
Councillor Constantine, I can be very, very generous, but I think we're wandering away from the Leader's report at the moment. Can you wind up, please?
Benefit. What are we doing to look again at housing benefit so that many more of our families can afford accommodation properly? I note with interest the Lord's visit. I'm glad that that was a success. I'm glad that Ramsgate got a mention. We would have preferred a visit, I have to tell you. I note that the Lord's was across Thanet. I wondered why it wasn't cross-party. Indeed, Labour felt very left out, and I think that was very short-sighted of you. I know this government has pledged to pledge £2 billion to fund the building of social housing and to scrap the limit on how much councils can borrow. The challenge for you is to identify that land
We're wandering
now,
again,
so
Councillor
that we can
Constantine.
identify in advance
This is an
2020,
agenda item for a future meeting.
so we could avoid rough sleepers.
Yes, it's rough sleeping.
I'm pleased, of course, let me continue, please. I'm pleased, of course, that we have no families now in temporary accommodation, hotel accommodation. However, we do still have families out of area. We do still have children taken away from their social and support networks, and we do still have children who are not getting access to the education that they rightfully deserve. I'm wondering what we are doing to address that issue. I'm surprised when you thanked the employees, Leader, that you didn't also thank the volunteers at the Volunteer Information Centre, many of whom work very, very hard. I'm pleased that visitors to Ramsgate and elsewhere are rising. I'm also pleased that the public toilets will be kept open until the end of October, but they will need cleaning more regularly. There were some deficiencies in the report, in particular the £70,000 that residents paid for the AVIA report was not submitted to PINS and should have been submitted to PINS. And with regard to the STP, Councillor Wells formed an executive scrutiny committee to look at the East Kent Trust. Today, the CQC named and shamed
I think
Kent
we're wandering
Trust
again, Councillor Constantine. I keep saying that, and I can be
one
as
of
generous
the
as anything, but can you please wind up? We
I
may
will.
well hear some of this in the scrutiny reports which follow.
I just wanted to point out that East Kent has been cited as one of the worst 4 providers in the country, and you can bet your bottom dollar we'll be at the bottom of the bottom. And I also wondered what the Leader was doing with regard to the stroke service. And last but not least, assets in Thanet are indeed the family silver. While other councils are busy acquiring assets and building up a portfolio, while borrowing is cheap, why aren't Thanet following that lead? Could the Leader answer that question? Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you, Councillor Constantine. I didn't realise we were already in an election. I thought that was next May. Leader, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Chairman. As expected, Councillor Constantine delivered a speech rather than comment on my report or ask questions thereof. Just to pick up, because I'm not going to get into items of national policy and so on. I'm here to talk about what happens here in Thanet. Just a couple of points on there. I gather that you talked about that there are families that are homeless that are housed outside the area, but I understand that these families are brought back as quickly as possible into Thanet. I think where the rough sleeping numbers are concerned, I'm not sure what number you gave, but I'm advised that as of the 3rd of October, we had 40 rough sleepers, which I think is fewer than the number that you quoted there. As far as the investment is concerned, yes, you're absolutely right. I can assure you that we as a council are looking into opportunities that may exist for investment. But as you well know, the councils have to be very, very prudent in what they do. So we're not going to be running into things. Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay.
Please, I'll have the public gallery cleared if we can't get through this meeting civilised.
Can I just say, Chairman, as well, I'm slightly disappointed there are so many supporters of Councillor Venables, because it hasn't left enough room for my fan club from Ramsgate Port. But there we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. No, you can't. No, you've had... No, sorry, point of order. You've had your say. Thank you. I'm moving on to agenda item 10, which is a report of the Chairman of the Executive Policy and Community Safety Scrutiny Panel. I call upon Councillor Glenn Coleman-Cook to present the report. Councillor Coleman-Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Executive Scrutiny Panel met on the 27th of September, where we discussed the Museum's Asset Management Report and the Food Law Service Plan and Enforcement Policy. On the Food Law Service Plan and Enforcement Policy report, we recommended the policy for adoption by the Council and proposed that the Council identified funding for staff training and additional staffing in order to effectively deliver the highly needed statutory service. On the Asset Management Thanet Museums report, we requested Cabinet to establish when the £50,000 funds bequeathed to Dickens House would be made available to be used for the maintenance of the museum, and whether TDC had the right to dispose of the building. Although the panel planned to discuss the crime statistics in Thanet report from the Community Safety Partnership, it will now get the report on the 13th of November meeting. Under the new scrutiny arrangements, the Executive Scrutiny Panel is responsible for call-ins of executive decisions, but since my last report, no call-ins have been made to the panel. I look forward to continuing to work with the Cabinet and officers to make our decision-making process stronger for the benefit of our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And agenda item... Sorry, Councillor Johnson, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman of that committee. Unfortunately, you weren't there, but it was ably chaired by Councillor Curran, and I have looked at the report that's going to Cabinet that followed that meeting, and I'm a little disappointed that it's not clearer how strongly we felt about a number of issues, particularly the Margate Museum, the Mayor's Parlour. Thank you for mentioning the £50,000 that is due, really, and long bequeathed to the Dickens Museum, because that needs resolving. The Council seem to be dragging their heels on those efforts, but I felt on the night that we had a good hearing, cross-party, about the Margate Mayor's Parlour, that the Mayor wished to return urgently to that parlour. Our Mayor even came and spoke herself that evening, and so I don't think the report to Cabinet is strong enough about what we decided that night. The other point that I raised was under the food section, because with Brexit and the changes that are coming forward, it said there were no financial implications for the Council in that report on that night, and the officer did agree that she realised she should have said there will be financial implications. We're going to need to train new staff, we're going to have to look at what's coming from national government once Brexit is implemented. So, as I say, unfortunately you weren't there, but we did have a very good meeting, ably chaired. I substituted for Councillor Campbell and was able to particularly raise the issues of the museums. And I don't think the Cabinet report quite matches what we decided that night. And the Chair over there is nodding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, and I'm sure your comments will be taken on board by both the Chairman of that committee and the Vice Chairman. Thank you. Agenda item 11, report of the Chairman of the Finance, Budget and Performance Scrutiny Panel. I call upon Councillor Linda Piper to present the report. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. Our committee has not met since I last reported to members. At the last council meeting, I mentioned that we were going to receive a full report concerning port finances at our October meeting, and a report about Thanet residents being in temporary accommodation at the following meeting. I would like to encourage members to attend the future finance, budget and performance scrutiny meetings. I also invited members to write to me if there was a topic on which they would like our committee to have a presentation, and this evening I would repeat that invitation and ask that emails are copied to Mr Charles Hunway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. Agenda item 12, constitutional changes to contract procedure rules. I call upon Councillor Gregory. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you, Chairman. This report covers the review and updating of the Council's contract standing orders. The Council's contract standing orders set out minimum obligations to be met by spending officers when purchasing goods, works or services on behalf of the authority. They periodically require revision to meet the changing needs of the business and changes in legislation. As you'd expect, some changes are purely housekeeping, such as updating job titles of responsible officers, but there are other more substantive changes. These include the introduction of an e-tendering system, changes in procurement legislation and the introduction of the General Data Protection Regulations. There are also greater reporting and transparency obligations that the Council now has a statutory duty to meet under the Local Government Transparency Code. These changes are listed within the report at 2.1 and referenced to the contract standing orders number as contained in Annex 1. Also highlighted in the report is the realignment of spending thresholds to those of our neighbouring authorities, Canterbury, Dover, Folkestone and Hythe. to provide consistency of approach across the East Kent authorities. This helps enable the standardisation of processes with our suppliers and contractors, with consistent spend thresholds that assist with collaborative working when undertaking joint procurements. It also simplifies the role of shared services such as East Kent Housing and East Kent Services, when those organisations are involved in procurements on behalf of the East Kent districts. The revision of the contract standing orders has been presented to the Constitutional Review Working Party, which requested 3 amendments included at paragraphs 3.1 to 3.3 of this report. Standards Committee then endorsed the revisions requested by the Working Party, and I move that Council approves the recommendation in paragraph 4.1 and adopts contract standing orders in Annex 1 as revised by the recommendations of the Constitutional Review Working Party and the Standards Committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Do members agree? Oh, sorry. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Obviously, we take very seriously our constitution as a council, and people who work on the Constitutional Working Party go with through the agenda and through the items with a fine-tooth comb. When the report came to the Standards Committee, the officer putting the report to us chose not to push for people who work for this council and subcontracted state having a living wage for their staff. And we argued throughout the evening that what the Constitutional Working Party had recommended must go be supported by the Standards Committee cross-party, should not be ignored. We should not overturn what the Constitutional Working Party had recommended to us. And I would like to make sure, and say it again here this evening, that where we contract out subcontract work from this council, that the people that we deal with pay their employees a living wage. And we asked, and there was a lot of pressure on us that night not to agree that. I hope that you are, I'm sure you are, listening, and that no one tries to overturn our decisions. Thank you.
Councillor Gregory to respond, because I believe all of that is in the report.
Yeah, it says, thank you, Councillor Johnston. In 3.1, there's a recommendation there that consideration is given to inclusion of a provision to require contractors to pay the national living wage. So we're adopting that tonight. They are the 3 recommendations, 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3, that we're adopting tonight.
No, I'm sorry. Councillor Campbell next. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, just to support Councillor Johnson, at the actual working party, we actually insisted, and I think it was unanimous, that we include within the actual contract negotiations that we would, in future, only to work with organisations and suppliers that provided the living wage to their employees. Not just a living wage to our employees, but living wage to the suppliers and contractors that we contract. That went, I think, to the Standards Committee, and I think Councillor Johnson pushed it through at the Standards Committee. I think also that if we are going to actually work towards contractors a living wage, that it should be time-scaled. Shouldn't be an open-ended, sometime in the future, perhaps never, we're going to actually work towards this. There should be a time scale actually put with it so that we will actually achieve it at a given time.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Gregory, have you got anything to respond to that?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my understanding, I have to say, is that we have a legal requirement for our contractors to pay the living wage over 25, and we have a minimum wage to pay from 21 to 25 and from 18 to 20 and for apprentices and so on. And this is all overseen by HMSO. So it should already be happening, in all honesty. I mean, this is just us putting into our performance standards what should already be happening, in all honesty.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory. No, can I carry on? I'm sure we're all eagerly awaiting for the next agenda item, which is agenda item 13. Oh, sorry, we need to agree that. Sorry, I got to a seconder, and do members agree?
Seconded.
You haven't put an amendment forward. No. Can I put it to the vote? All those in agreement? Are we any against? Thank you. Agenda item 13, declaration of vacancy, Margate Central Ward. Now, Councillor Johnson. We're not showcasing here. This is a valid point, are we?
Chairman, I have neither the time nor the inclination to showcase on this item. The residents of my ward, which is one of the most deprived...
Is this a point of order?
It is a point of order. It is the first time in my 24 years that I have seen a vacancy announced at a council meeting like this. It is the first time in my 24 years where a councillor is named where he is supposed to be an employee of this council. This should not be on white, it should be on pink. So therefore, I'm telling you and advising you of the information I have from the Labour Party solicitor and the Labour Party council. This item should be withdrawn. We are walking up a very dangerous path as councillors if we support this. I'm asking, please, that this item, I'm proposing that this item is withdrawn. The lawyers are locked in battle on this one, and if it ever goes to a vote, I want a recorded vote, because I don't want my name tarnished with what this decision is. Councillor Venables is working for the Forward Trust, not this council. And this is a total misinformation. And I'm sorry, but our solicitor has advised that the report is full of errors, and this evening, with her permission, I have clicked it to every member in this room who can't say they haven't been told that they are being asked to vote for something that is untrue. Thank you.
Seconded.
Point of order, point of order. I have not introduced the item yet, and as you will know, Councillor Johnson, from the meeting we had yesterday, this council has a statutory requirement to have this item on the agenda in the way that it's being published. So the item is the declaration of vacancy, Margate Central Ward. I call upon... We have quiet. I want to get this agenda item through in a civilised way. I understand there's a lot of passion in the room. I can be very, very passionate, but I need to get this meeting through in an orderly fashion. So I now call upon Sophia Narty. Point of order, and this is a point of order, is it?
Chair, it is a point of order. I would like to know what breach of the Section 80 of the Local Government Act 1972 Ian Venables is responsible for. It's very clear about disqualifications. It says either employed directly, which we all understand the terms of. It then goes on to say, are employed by a company which is under the control of the local authority. That is not the situation here. That is not the case. This is wrong-footed. I propose we look again at this.
My understanding is that the lawyers are in fact looking at those very points outside this meeting, but it's not for this meeting. I'm not sorry, I need to get this item through. If I can't get this item through, I will clear the public gallery. I will ask for a 5-minute recess. I need the legal officer to explain the situation. Sophia Nart, I'm sorry, I can start shouting as loudly as you can. Sophia Narty, can you explain the situation? And if I can't have silence, we'll clear the public gallery. Is this a point of order? And it's not a point of order that we've already covered. Thank you.
Because if I quote what you said, the lawyers are looking at it. Now, if that is the case, I do think that it is in the interest of this council to leave this matter alone until the lawyers have decided what the real situation is. Otherwise, we are taking this council into very dangerous ground.
That's not a point of order. Legal officer to explain the situation. Thank you.
As the report explains, Mr Venables lost his qualification to be a councillor when he took up a secondment role with the council. This report is not concerned with how or why that happened. The disqualification has happened. The effect of the disqualification would apply whether or not the actions which resulted in the disqualification were done in good faith and or without the knowledge of the effects of Section 80 of the Local Government Act 1972. Section 80 simply operates to disqualify someone who falls within its terms as a matter of law. Under Section 86 of the Local Government Act 1972, where a councillor ceases to be qualified to be a councillor, the law requires that the council shall declare the office to be vacant. So the council has no choice in the matter. It has to declare the vacancy.
Sorry, can we let the legal officer speak, please? If this continues, I'll have to clear the public gallery. I'm sorry. Just listen to the legal officer, listen to the argument, and then take that concern elsewhere, please.
I'll repeat that last section again. Under Section 86 of the Local Government Act 1972, where a councillor ceases to be qualified to be a councillor, the law requires that the council shall declare the office to be vacant. So the council has no choice in the matter. It has to declare the vacancy in the Margate Central Ward.
Councillor Campbell, have we got a point of order?
Yeah, I have a point of order, yes, from just what the legal officer has just said. I don't hold what the legal officer said in contention at all. It's the fact that whether or not Councillor Venables has been fairly disqualified. If he has been fairly disqualified, then yes, the council is legally obliged to actually note the vacancy. But our contention is he has not been legally disqualified under Section 80 of that particular report.
Ms Varney.
Chairman, I'd like to come back on that point regarding disqualification. This report is not regarding disqualification. It's simply to declare the vacancy. If Mr Venables feels that there is an issue regarding disqualification, there is a separate avenue for him to pursue. This particular avenue is within your gift as members to make this decision to declare the vacancy. It's not regarding disqualification. I understand that there are issues regarding disqualification which has been brought forward by other lawyers but not by the council. If that needs to be explored, that will be explored separately to this process. So what you're being asked to do this evening, members, is to declare the vacancy.
One final point before I put it to the meeting. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. It's not a point of order, but I'm responding to your notes that we received yesterday that said quite clearly this item may be debated in the usual way. I would like to ask for some formal recognition, given the information that's out there in the public domain, that this decision has nothing to do with any impropriety on the part of Ian Venables, that this is a situation that has been done to him, and therefore we should note that he has not misbehaved in any way, shape or form, and that, yes, the council is now using the legal situation to get this notice out there because it has no choice. It has to do it this evening, but it leaves a very, very bad taste in the mouth. And I really do ask, I'm sure on behalf of everybody, that it's recognised that Ian Venables has done nothing wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. So Fire will respond.
Chairman, on that point, I would just like to give my advice that you cannot add an additional note. This is simply regarding the vacancy, so any notes would have to be around that vacancy, not regarding the disqualification.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the proposal to the council. So we debate after I put the proposal. I propose that Council 1 notes that Ian Venables... I'm sorry, look, if I was a referee I would have issued 12 yellow cards and I'm just about to get my red card out and send people out the chamber. Councillor Hayton.
When we become councillors, we sign a form saying if we've got anything to do with the council, serving the council, being an employee of the council. I'm sure ex-Councillor Venables has done that. And of course... Do you mind? I don't shout when you're shouting. Let me get on with mine, all right?
Can we talk through the chair? I'm getting very
We've all
impatient
signed that
here.
piece of paper, Chairman, and quite frankly, that's what should happen. If anybody contravenes and starts working for the council, then they should vacate the council. There will be a council in next May when ex-Councillor Venables can put his name forward as a member, and of course he will have to give up his work with the council. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hayton. That wasn't a point of order. That was part of the debate which will take place. I now need to put this proposal in the order that we have the opportunity of debating it. So the proposal is, 1, that the Council notes that Ian Venables has become disqualified from being a member of this authority, and 2, that the Council declares as vacant the office held by Ian Venables as a councillor for the Margate Central Ward. Would the Vice Chairman second?
I second that, Chair.
I say again that we have a statutory requirement to have this on the agenda and get this matter underway. Can I assume that councillors would wish to continue the debate? I'd like to get on with the vote so that we can get things moving. But Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for your time on this. The report is actually full of errors. Mr Venables, it says in the report, applied for and has taken up a secondment with the Council. Councillor Hayton, he did not apply for the job. The Council got the funding which we've been told about earlier in the evening for homeless people. The Council decided to work with the Forward Trust. Councillor Venables is an employee of the Forward Trust. This Council invited the Forward Trust to recommend somebody for the position in the RISE team. They recommended their best person, 25 years' experience. He's employed by the Forward Trust, he sits with the Forward Trust, and he works with the council team here. The lawyers and the council for the Labour Party are very clear that this sort of case has been tested before. And they're very clear that Ian Venables has an extremely strong case against this council, and there are many others going on, which is causing me great embarrassment as a councillor. I'm sticking to the item. We must stop making mistakes. This council asked the Forward Trust, they asked particularly for Ian. Ian took on the job in good faith. Not only that, but he asked, was it okay to take it on? The Forward Trust asked, was it okay if he was still a councillor? And they were told it was okay. I came in on numerous occasions to see Mr Howes. I had to explain to him what it was about because he didn't really know an awful lot about it. I'm sorry, everybody, we need to get this out. Cut a long story short, he was running to and fro trying to get the right information. And with Councillor Matterface, up to a week before, he was saying it's still a grey area. And the next thing, all of our councillors were told that this item was coming on the 11th. Jenny didn't know he was declaring that Ian was disqualified. Ian is only disqualified because this council have got it wrong. Ian is employed by the Forward Trust. That's the name on his payslip. That's who guides his work in this group that he's got. The government are looking, and the civil servant is looking at what you're doing with the money they've given you. And they're very quick to take it back if you don't spend it right. And I'm telling you, we are getting the best advice on this. Now, what I have asked the leader is, where is the council advice? Now, the other day you told me you hadn't seen it. I think every time you speak to an officer in this council, you need to see in writing what they're telling you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. There was a fair amount of hearsay there. I wasn't there. I get my advice from I get my advice from officers, and as I keep saying, this is a statutory requirement to get this through. Councillor Constantine, are we not going to go over the same ground, because I'd like to get the vote going?
I'd like to defend my colleague, Councillor Iris, because I've seen Miss Johnson. Very sorry.
Mrs. I'm married, actually.
I'll start again. I would like to support my colleague, Councillor Iris Johnson, because I've seen that memo and she's exactly correct in what she's saying. So that's the first thing. Just as an aside to this, I've been 25 years employed as a professional trade union officer. Part of my daily job is to advise members when they have a difficulty. The first thing I have to do when somebody comes to me who is a member of my trade union and has a difficulty is I have to ascertain who their employer is. How do I do that? I look at who they are paid by. In this case, Ian Venables is paid by Forward. Who are their terms and conditions with? In this case, Ian Venables' terms and conditions are with the Forward Trust. He is an employee of the Forward Trust. Correct. What I say is if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. This decision is a duck. Ian Venables is an employee of the Forward Trust and should not be disqualified under Section 80. Should not be.
Thank you, Councillor Constantine. I think we've already heard that there are some procedural issues that need to be looked in outside this council chamber. Councillor Hayton.
Thank you very much, Chairman. People over there, councillors over there, seem to think that they haven't signed that piece of paper that I was talking about. We all have to sign that and adhere to what is signed inside. And quite frankly, it's no good shouting me down. You've got this rabble here that I can't hear what you're saying. And quite frankly, when I'm talking, they're talking. But when you're talking, they're quiet because they like what you talk.
Okay, right. Thank you, Councillor Hayton. I am now in a position where I need to get on with the vote, and any more from the public gallery, I will issue that final warning. We will have a recess and we will clear the public gallery. So I'm going to put it to the vote, but before we do, can I... Councillor Campbell, sorry.
Request a recorded vote.
If more than 50% of the members agree, I'm quite happy to have a recorded vote. Do members agree on a recorded vote? If you can put your hands up if you do. Hold them high so we can have a count. Those against? Those against? Abstentions?
So yes, we'll have a recorded vote.
Right, we will have a recorded vote, Councillor Campbell. And you'll notice that I didn't need to use my casting vote. Right, before we vote... Leave the mic on. Before we move to the vote, I would just like to clarify what we are voting for. And I would also like to say that I did receive requests that this item would be removed from the agenda, and I have to say that that is not within my gift. We have to get it on the agenda this evening. We have to go through this procedure. So, I understand that there is concern over circumstances surrounding Councillor Venables' disqualification as a councillor. However, Council tonight is not being asked to decide whether or not he has been disqualified. That disqualification has happened by operation of the law. That position is supported by the monitoring officer and the Council that has been providing advice to him. It is open to Mr Venables to challenge that disqualification in the courts. Once a councillor has been disqualified, the law requires the council forthwith declare his office to be vacant. Can I just read this? I'm sorry. Right, okay. Councillors, we're going to have a 5-minute recess while I clear the public gallery. You had your opportunity to see a recorded vote, but I want the public gallery cleared. Thank you. Right, well, thanks for the round of applause. I'm obliged to give you one more opportunity to leave the chamber. So if you won't leave the chamber and you are verbally refusing to leave the chamber, is that the case? In that case, I'm adjourning the meeting. We will reassemble on Monday. Thank you. Good night, and I'm sorry, councillors, for the inconvenience.
Please be standing for the Chairman of Thanet District Council.
Please be seated. Good evening, members and officers of the Council. I welcome you to this continuation of the meeting of the Council held on Thursday last, the 11th of October. Pleased to see as many members have managed to make it, including Councillor Wells. I have to say, looking very, very relaxed. I'll have to remember to leave my tie off next time. I have to go through the housekeeping. Or even though this is a continuation, if the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the stairs, either through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Agenda item 1, which is in fact the continuation of the situation we had on Thursday, so it's continuation of agenda item 13, declaration of vacancy, Margate Central Ward. I call upon Mr Howes, Director of Corporate Governance and Deputy Monitoring Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, before we move to the vote, I'd just like to clarify what Council are being asked to vote upon this evening. Whilst I understand there's been much discussion over the circumstances surrounding Councillor Venable's disqualification as a councillor, Councillor tonight is not being asked to decide whether or not he has been disqualified, since that disqualification has happened by operation of law. It is, of course, open to Mr Venables to challenge that disqualification in the courts if he thinks fit. However, once a councillor has been disqualified, the law requires, I emphasise that point, the law requires that the council forthwith declare his office to be vacant. There is no discretion to be exercised by the council tonight on that matter. So council tonight is simply being asked to carry out its legal duties under Section 86 of the Local Government Act 1972 to forthwith declare a vacancy for councillor in the Margate Central Ward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Constantine has her hand up. Is this a point of order?
It is a point of order. If it's
Can you first refer to the point of order that you are going to speak on?
I can't actually. I can't refer to the point of order I'm going to speak to.
In that
what I
case,
wanted to say,
unless you can quote it word for word, it's not a point of order.
It was on the procedure. You've never asked me to quote this before. You didn't ask me to quote this the other night. You need to be consistent, Chair, in your approach. You need to ask every member of this chamber to quote word for word the point of order whenever anybody brings a point of order. My point is this: if we're rehearsing, rehashing why we're here, then we also need to rehearse and re-listen to some of the arguments and some of the debates as to why we're here.
No, we've had the debate.
This isn't a simple application of law. This
No,
is actually a mistake.
This
is a mistake in the making, and I would be remiss as a councillor if I didn't bring that to your attention.
This is not a point of order, and can I just speak over you and say that procedurally we have gone through the debate, we have had the motion put before the members, it has been seconded, we've had a vote to have a recorded vote. We're now at the position, following the recorded vote, where it was necessary to clear the public gallery. We can now move on to the recorded vote, unless you have a valid point of order.
Thank you, Chair. If you could in future treat everybody with the same seriousness, if I have to quote word for word, then I would expect you to do that with all members in this chamber.
I
at
will
all
indeed.
times.
In fact,
What
point
you
of
are doing
orders
is
rarely
veteran-
come up in this chamber whilst I've been sitting in this chair.
I don't believe that this is an application of law. I believe this is a mistake.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a clarification of the Constitution. I would like to know whether or not members who weren't present at the previous meeting on Thursday and therefore never heard the debate are allowed to vote tonight without the advantage of listening to the debate that took place.
Monitoring officer will respond.
Obviously, members can decide themselves whether they feel they're fully informed, but I would point out this is a procedural motion, which is a legal requirement. It's simply a step, an administrative step that the council must take once a member is disqualified. So there is an issue about discretion or points for or against. What the law says is that once a councillor has been disqualified, then forthwith the council must declare the position to be vacant. So there's not an issue about debate, about weighing up the balance of different issues. It is what the law says and what the law requires. And I would encourage you, as your monitoring officer, that you should follow the law and declare the post to be vacant. Thank you.
Councillor Wells.
Well, again, in the same spirit, some clarification. I mean, there's a couple of things there. I think I was rather interested to receive an invite to this meeting because that was my understanding. I think it was Councillor Bafer's understanding from a very long time that if you hadn't taken part in the debate, that you would not normally vote. Right? Secondly, the situation isn't quite, I think, as the Monitor Officer describes it, because actually the point before us tonight, it is indeed, it's a request for clarification of the position, because what is put before us tonight is a consequence of the disqualification. And if there is any doubt in anybody's mind in this chamber that the disqualification is accurate or not, and we have only seen one legal advice on this, and that is one that tells us no, because your legal advice, sir, gone from council, is apparently secret and not to be shared. And there is a situation here where what happens, in terms of clarification, if we don't pass this procedural, and if that is then overruled in some way, what the hell are we doing here?
Thank you. Monitoring officer.
Were the council to breach Section 86 of the Local Government Act and not declare the post to be vacant as is required by law, then I think as monitoring officer I would have to consider that decision and its lawfulness. If necessary, compile a monitoring officer's report about that lawfulness and bring it back to a future meeting.
Let's respond to that. I think that would be very sensible.
Yeah. I'm being as patient and as giving everyone the opportunity. Now, this is point of order and only point of order, and I can be patient. I'm not asking you for word, but I mean it needs to be a point of order that relates to the Constitution. Councillor Brim.
Thank you, Chair. I find it very difficult to take this seriously when the monitoring officer doesn't even carry out the own constitution. It's not democratic. I don't think you're fit for purpose, Tim Howes.
No, we don't want any personal comments like that. Thank you very much.
Respect, Chairman, I think you ought to make some comment about that. I think it's wholly inappropriate. It's inappropriate for a member to act like this in this chamber, and you should consider whether you ought to stay here. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson, I know you had your hand up earlier, and I know this will be a point of order because you know the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, I have raised this on a number of occasions with colleagues that the Constitution needs a complete overhaul. Those of us who are on standards have been challenging and asking questions, as have people on the Constitutional Working Party. And we mightn't have been here tonight if there was an issue covered about secondments in the Constitution.
But it's not a point of order, Councillor Johnson.
You may hide behind point of order, but you've actually had a letter today from the Labour Party solicitor that you need to share. You also need to share
Councillor Johnson, I know enough about legal proceedings that if I've received anything of a legal matter, it will retain in my memory, it will be private and confidential, and when it goes to a legal situation, you don't take sides.
Okay.
I've got to stay impartial.
Okay,
I'm not
okay.
interested, and this is not a point of order.
Well,
Thank you very
my
much.
point of order is that if the new members in here tonight who weren't here on Thursday and didn't hear the debate, the same applies to Mr Howes, who was not here on Thursday and didn't hear the debate. So we're in a catch-22 position with Mr Howes because he didn't hear the debate. Now, my real point of order is that you must tell us Mr Howes, what council advice was to you? Why is it not attached to our agendas? We need to read it before we vote on something so important. And you certainly should be sharing what the Labour Party solicitor has sent today. To protect all of us, to protect this council, we need to have every bit of information in front of us. And I certainly think that we should withdraw this item. Again, I'm asking to withdraw it.
No.
Okay?
You're making a statement. It's not. You know. It's
Well,
not a point.
the statement will come back to
Mr.
haunt
Willis,
you if you
Mr.
don't
Willis
listen to
will
me.
respond to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to respond to Councillor Johnson. I don't think that there was a point of order, but that's for you to judge. What I do want to say is that what Councillor Brim just said in relation to an officer is completely unacceptable from an officer's point of view, and hopefully from most members' points of view as well, although they need to make their own judgment on that. I just hope that no member will consider that to be acceptable behaviour in a public meeting again, because it absolutely isn't to make personal comments about the professional integrity of individual officers. Thank you, Chair.
I'll allow you. Your hands up. Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a dilemma here.
Is this a point of order or another statement?
It must be, because we might find ourselves in a situation where this council might have decided that Councillor Venables is disqualified, and we have a by-election, a new member is elected, and yet the courts decide that Councillor Venables should not have been disqualified. So we end up with two members elected for the same ward. Now, this is why it would be so important to get the council advice from Mr House so that we know exactly where we stand.
It's not a point of order, and we haven't got to that stage yet. Thank you. Councillor Willis.
Thank you.
So I'm promoting people again.
I've been called councillor before, Chairman, and I'm not sure I'd consider it a promotion. Thank you. I just want to make the point, just to emphasise once again that to councillors, just to try and be helpful, unless it's a point of order in accordance with our constitution, then we're ready to move to the next item of business, which is for the recorded vote on the motion at hand.
Thank you. If we can move to the recorded vote, I will have my knuckles rapped for being far too liberal. Is it a point of order?
Thank you, Chairman. It's for clarification of what we're being asked to do this evening. Am I allowed to get an answer for that?
That's not a point of order. The monitoring officer has already explained what the vote means and what we're doing here this evening. I think I'll read the motion again, but it already has been seconded, and as I said at the start, we've already voted to have a recorded vote, so I'd like to move on to the recorded vote. But I will read the motion, and the motion says... Councillor Bayford.
I don't want to be difficult, but I mean, you know what these things are like. Well, if we don't get it right, then there's issues. And Councillor Wells asked a question some time ago, which I think was a reasonable one, which I do agree with, that, it does seem odd to me that if this is a continuation of a meeting, that members that weren't here shouldn't really be allowed to vote on this matter. And I wonder why they've been invited to come back, quite honestly.
Thank you. Monitoring officer, can you respond on that? I have the same query.
All members are invited to council meetings, and sometimes members can't be here at the start, and they'll come to a meeting later on. But in this particular instance, this is an administrative proposal. This is not a matter about discretion for the authority where listening to debate on the matter is actually relevant at all. So that's why, particularly in this particular case, which is where it's a legal obligation on the council to declare this vacancy, the issue about whether they've heard a debate on the matter is not relevant. So I think it is appropriate for members who weren't here last week that they could vote on the matter.
I'm being far too patient, I'm being told,
No,
but
well-
Councillor Wells, eloquent
back to
as
your
ever,
patience,
we're
Mr.
prepared to listen to you.
It's a very simple question. It's one I would just like to have an answer to, which is that if this is a consequence of disqualification of a councillor, could an officer please explain to me why Councillor Venables was invited to this meeting?
I was not aware he had been invited to the meeting. If he had, that would have been an error. So that doesn't affect the disqualification. Yeah.
Look, thank you for that admission. Can we go on to the admission about the letter that was written by this council advising employers that this wasn't going to happen?
I'm not aware of that letter. I need to go to the vote. I will read the motion out for members. 1. The Council notes that Ian Venables has become disqualified for being a member of this authority, and 2. Declares as vacant the office held by Ian Venables as a councillor for the Margate Central Ward. I'd now like to move on to the recorded vote, if I may.
Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bayford. Councillor Braidwood. Councillor Brim. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Glenn Coleman Cook. Absent. Councillor Keith Coleman Cook. Councillor Connor. Councillor Constantine. Councillor Crowe-Brown. Councillor Dawson. Absent. Councillor Day. Yeah. Councillor Della. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dexter. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Edwards. Absent. Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Jeremy Fairbrass.
Against.
Councillor Lynn Fairbrass. Councillor Falcon. Councillor Fenner. Councillor Game. Absent. Councillor Gregory. Councillor Grove. Councillor Hillman. Councillor J. Jones. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Larkins. Absent. Councillor Martin. Absent. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Linda Piper. Councillor Stuart Piper. Councillor Linda Potts. Councillor Roy Potts. Councillor Pugh. Not present. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Rozecki. Councillor David Saunders. Councillor Maeve Saunders. Councillor Savage. Councillor Shonk. Councillor Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Townend. Councillor Wells. Councillor Wright. Yeah, lost, yeah. No, that's fine, that's fine.
Right, that motion was lost. 13 for, 27 against, and 1 abstention. Right, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 2. Yes, we can. Item 14, changes to committees, panels and boards. 2018-19. I am told it is relevant. Proportionality. I call upon the leader to make a proposal in respect of the options as outlined in the report. Councillor Bayford.
Chairman, I'm afraid that I've got to agree with the mutterings from the floor. I don't actually see that this really follows, because Council hasn't actually declared the vacancy. So if the post isn't vacant, by definition it must be filled.
We're risking conflating two things here. One is, the earlier item was to declare a vacancy to cause an election to be held, which you've refused to do that, albeit they have no legal power to do that. The issue about it doesn't affect the disqualification of the councillor. The councillor is still disqualified, so you still have a reduction in the number of councillors.
Mr Chairman, can I propose that we put this item to one side until such time as we have certainty about disqualification, whether there is a vacancy?
Monitoring officer to respond.
I don't know why there is uncertainty. I am the Council's Monitoring Officer, the Head of Legal Services, with responsibility for legal services. I have obtained legal advice from Council, which confirms that Councillor Venables has been disqualified. I have no grounds to reconsider that advice. I've received representations from other parties, none of which made me change my mind in terms of the legal provisions regarding disqualifications and Section 80 of the Local Government Act 1972. So on that basis, there is no legal doubt. Your council's head of legal, your council's monitoring officer is telling you that Councillor Venables is disqualified in terms of the law, and therefore it's appropriate to move on to agenda item 2/14 to consider the composition of the council.
Councillor Campbell, point of order?
No. A proposition. I propose to set aside this agenda item to a later date until the clarity of the suspended councillor is made clear.
Can we have a 5-minute adjournment? We now resume 4 minutes, not 5 minutes. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chairman. I move that this item be deferred to a future meeting.
Thank you, members, and apologies for calling you back this evening. That now concludes the business. Oh, sorry. I know this is a foregone conclusion. Do members agree? That wasn't as good as the sing-song on Thursday, was it? That now concludes the business of the meeting this evening, 7:25. Thank you.